and I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker, Molefi Asante, and I will just highlight some of his achievements. However, his full bio is included in our journey. Molefi Asante is an activist intellectual who is currently professor at the chair of the Department of the African American Studies at Temple University. He is also president of Molefi Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies. He has been recognized as one of the 10 most widely cited African scholars, and he is also recognized as one of the most influential leaders in education. Asante has completed his MA at Pepperdine University and received a PhD from the University of California at the age of 26. He was appointed as a full professor at the age of 30 at the State University of New York and Buffalo. At Temple University, he created the first PhD program in African American Studies in 1989. He is a poet, a novelist, dramatist, and a painter. He is the international organizer for the Afrocentricity International, a global African organization involved in establishing new pathways to African identity and culture. I present to some and introduce to others Dr. Molefi Asante, a friend of my grandmother, Margot, and my grandfather, the late Dr. Donald Clark.
Hotel. I greet you in the name of the great African tradition, Habar Hotel, which is the earliest known expression that we have for peace. And it comes out of the ancient Nile Valley civilization. I just want to thank you for inviting me to be the speaker here on this wonderful occasion. I am truly honored when Margot called me and asked me. I remember Donald very well. I used to live in this neighborhood, so I now live in Center City, but I lived for many years in Elkins Park, so I was very much delighted to come back to this neighborhood for the NAACP Banquet Awards banquet. The NAACP, as you know, because you're a member, is a venerable organization, and it has, from its very inception at the beginning of the 20th century, been one of those organizations that has tried always to advance the notion of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I want to start by saying to you that there's nothing wrong with diversity, and there's nothing wrong with inclusion or equity. And I think that you, as members of the NAACP, which is an organization that's always been multicultural from its very beginning, and multiracial, if you believe in the notion of race, which I don't, but we've always used that term, right? But the notion is that the NAACP has always advanced and worked toward the notion of an expansion of the American ideal, that which actually some people say was included in the thought of the founder, but was never realized because the founders themselves were also contradicted in their own morality. Many of them enslaved African people who were people who were actually against the idea that Africans should have the right to vote. And not only that Africans should not have the right to vote, but we shouldn't be counted in the census as full human beings. So there were problems with that. But nevertheless, inside the documents themselves, the documents revealed that there was a dream, an ideal that they had, at least for themselves. And it is through those ideals that we, as African people, and the Jewish people, and other people in this society, Latino people, have been able to fight and to push the boundaries of the American society, because we said, this is what you said. You said all people are created equal. Well, do you really believe that or not? Well, they didn't believe it initially. They were only talking about white males. But what happened was that we pushed, we fought, and we struggled to increase those borders and to say everybody should come in. Now let me tell you what the basis of that is in terms of our culture as African people, which is fundamental. The origin of Homo sapiens, that's who we all are in this room. We are Homo sapiens. There are no other races. We're Homo sapiens. The other so-called human races are all gone. Neanderthals are not here anymore. There may be some DNA that some few people have with Neanderthalian DNA, but they're not here. They're gone. Homo sapiens are here. 8 billion Homo sapiens. There are no Denisovans here. There are only Homo sapiens. The only race is humanity. Its origin is Africa. The origin of Homo sapiens, all of us in here. Our DNA goes right back 300,000 to 350,000 years ago to East Africa. Nobody can dispute that scientifically. There is no polygenesis where white people started in Europe, Asian people started in Asia, African people started in Africa. No. All humans are Homo sapiens. Before 70,000 years ago, all Homo sapiens were black. Because we had not left Africa. 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens left the continent of Africa and went to all the other continents. 30,000 years ago, they made it to Europe. We're all the same. 99.9. All Homo sapiens. The belief in the unity of humanity was from the very beginning an African idea. It was a deeply African notion. And this is why even today people talk about Ubuntu. When they talk about Ubuntu, where is it coming from? It comes from the African idea. We're all the same. I am because of you. We are not, there's no isolation. This ruthless individualism that is a part of the Western tradition is a recent idea. It's not the ancient idea that the Africans had. So even though there were hundreds of different ethnic communities from Africa brought to the Americas, mostly to South America, where Brazil, a country with 57% African people, was the largest recipient of African people from the African continent during the slave trade. Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Mexico, Canada, the United States, all had enslaved Africans. But what we knew, and we always knew it, in this country, those of us who are in the tradition and the heritage of fighters, we understood and we appreciated from the very beginning that those who had enslaved us, those who had, I grew up in Georgia, give you a context here. Those who had enslaved us, abused us, those who lynched Mary Turner, the great-grandmother of my nieces in Georgia, ripped her belly open, took out the fetus and stomped it to death. I know those histories. I know these people. In this tradition, we knew them as NAACP fighters, fighting for justice and fighting for right. In fact, in Mary Turner's case, Walter White, who's one of the great leaders of the NAACP, came down from New York to report on this. This was a terrible situation, but it happened so many times in African American history. I call it the betrayal of the dream. James Adams Truslow wrote a book in the 1940s about the Epic of America, in which he talked about the American dream. That's where the idea comes from. The American dream, the American dream. And Martin Luther King Jr. used it later. I have a dream. That dream was based on the fact of one humanity, that we all are human. And let me just say this. You know this as members of the NAACP, that no human life is any greater than another. And you must know that about Gaza and Israel, that no human life is worthless, neither Jewish nor Palestinian. But no human life can be more than another human's life. If we don't know that, then we don't know what the NAACP stood for. Because the NAACP stood for the fight that we had to understand that we were all humans. And as humans, we have this right to advance a moral and an ethical position. I was so happy to hear the rabbi speak about the young men of my generation, Goodman and Schwerner and Cheney. I knew that history. I was only a year younger than Emmett Till. I grew up in that era. And I know that the Jewish people that I went to school with at the University of California, they marched with me in Alabama. They struggled with us. But I also know today that those same Jewish students will also be fighting for the people of Gaza and Palestine. They were different than a lot of people today. They felt the same, and we felt the same. We understood that the Holocaust was the most tremendous thing that had happened to the Jewish people, and we felt that. I felt that. I marched against fascism, and I march against it today. Let me tell you something. You can't forget that history. If you forget that history, you will be nothing. That is our source. You know the old ancient story, mythological story, some people say, of Heru and Set. It's a very powerful story. It is that Set fought against Heru, who was the son of Osa and Oseth. Set was his uncle, was Heru's uncle. He fought against him. And in the end, Heru, and her sister Sherry was coming to tell me where she was right here, was telling me about being in Kemet. Kemet, of course, is the African name for Egypt. Egypt is a Greek name, remember that. There's different things here. But Kemet, she was in Kemet. And she knows this if she went to Edfu. Edfu is a place where Heru defeated Set. And they say, the Africans say, that that's where good defeated evil. On that site, they built a temple to it. It's still there. What was Heru? Heru was expansion. It was inclusion. It was acceptance. It was love of strangers. It was openness to all ideas and all people. What was Set? Set was divisiveness. It was exclusion. It was closing the door. It was fighting against the expansion of opportunity. We know good will always defeat evil, even though evil sometimes has a long ride. But good will always defeat it. And in this case, where good defeats evil, one of the things that we have to understand is that there will be those who will take all kinds of ideas and try to twist them around for you. And then we began to get these ideas. We assumed these ideas. Someone said, well, you know, all those people that marched yesterday, they were Antifa. What does Antifa stand for? It stands for anti-fascist. They were anti-fascists. Now, there's no organization, Antifa, that I know of. I've never seen it. But there are people who are anti-fascists. I'm one. Who were the fascists? Mussolini was a fascist. Hitler was a fascist. I'm against people who believe in cult leadership. I'm against people who believe in militarizing the city and taking over neighborhoods in a militaristic way. That's fascism. I'm against people who don't want you to speak publicly and voice your opinion, to shut down the freedom of speech. That's fascism. Are there people against that? Yes, I'm one. But I'm not a member of Antifa. That's someone trying to create something that doesn't exist. We are anti-fascists. Someone tell you don't be woke. By all means, open your eyes. Don't let people tell you that something's wrong with being woke. The African people created that slang term. And you know what we created it for? To be enlightened. You ought to be woke. You can't walk around hating people and thinking that you are enlightened, thinking that you are Heru when you are set. You have to be woke. And so what they have done is taken the language of freedom and the language that is used to express the most valuable moral and ethical principles and turn that around and say that's bad. Diversity is bad. This country was born out of diversity. It was diverse before Europeans got here. There were hundreds of indigenous groups. The Comanches were not the same as the Apaches or the Cherokee. They were not the same as the Seminole. These were different ethnic. There was a diversity. But that diversity was not a diversity of race. Race is a false concept. It was created by Europeans. No African ever created the concept of race. There's no idea in Africa where we better have it. We got all these races. What the Africans said, no, is it, they'll always ask the Africans, what language do you hear? You say, well, I hear Tree. You say, well, I hear Zulu. I hear Yoruba. We didn't ask what race are you. We asked what language do you hear? You say, I hear Greek. But you are still a human. So that's the fundamental basis of my point to you today. One humanity. This false notion of the creation of race in order to create hierarchy started with probably with patriarchy. Patriarchy, hierarchy, separation, division, fighting against people and claiming that you're better than some other human being when we're all the same. It's insanity. You can't believe in that. You can't accept that. So stony the road we trod. Bitter the chastening rod felt in the days when hope unborn had died. And yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our parents sighed. This is James Weldon Johnson, one of the greatest poets who ever lived in America, wrote this. And his brother Rosamond set it to music. This is a powerful statement. Over a wave, you see. You're treading through the path of the blood of the slaughter, out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last for the white gleam of a bright star in the sky. Thank you very much.